As Trump gives Elon Musk his blessing to unilaterally transform the federal workforce and budget, he's coming up against some powerful opposition, the rule of law. On Thursday, a judge ordered Trump's Office of Personnel Management to rescind instructions to federal agencies directing mass layoffs of federal workers. Another judge blocked DOJ's access to the Education Department's student loan systems. And a third judge extended a block on the administration's freeze of grants and loans, potentially totaling trillions of dollars. And these setbacks from Trump and company could be just the beginning. Joining us now, former federal prosecutor and Politico magazine senior writer Ankush Khardori, and the president and CEO of Democracy Forward, Skye Perryman. Her group has brought several lawsuits against the Trump administration.
I understand why everybody is putting a lot of emphasis on the lawsuits, right? Because that's an important thing to do. But do you think, Ankush, that there is potentially an over-reliance on this being the wall that stops the bad stuff from coming into our communities? You know, we were talking about how families are impacted. I don't. I have no faith that that's going to hold up, because I've seen too much over the last few years of how it has been systematically contorted and broken down. And I think that that's what we're going to see here. So how do those in the legal space continue to push to hold that up and to give it some resilience so it does become that bulwark against the encroachment and the deconstruction of our government?
Well, I think that is an excellent question, something I think a lot about, because you're right, the legal side of this will be uncertain and it will be time-consuming, right? But groups like Skye's are doing incredibly important work. These cases need to be filed. They'll take their time. And you're right to be skeptical of the Supreme Court, which, frankly, literally just kind of bailed Trump out of prison last summer, right? So that skepticism is warranted. My view, and, you know, as a political folks, I assume you share the view, the nearest way, the most proximate way to stop this would be if a handful of Republicans in either the Senate, the House, or both just banded together and said, no more. We're not confirming anyone else. We're not passing any spending authorization bills. This has to stop. That would put an end to this, probably pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that won't happen against Republicans.
Have you heard from any Republicans quietly who say, hey, keep going?
I have not, but I'll tell you they're hearing both quietly and quite loudly in their districts. Because when you do things like what we've had to stop at Democracy Forward, we've had to stop the federal essential services freeze or the federal funding freeze. We've had to stop a range of these unlawful and disastrous attempts by DOJ to run roughshod over people and communities. That affects everybody, and it affects people in blue states, and it affects people in red states too. And so you're seeing people show up in red districts across the country saying, what is this about Elon Musk having access to my personal data? What is this about me wondering if I am going to be able to rely on Meals on Wheels? What are you doing? We didn't elect this. We didn't vote for this. And so I think that there is a reckoning coming. I think the courts are doing a great job in giving the time and the exposure and stopping a lot of this harm in its tracks. And I think that, I think those that are going to double down on the Elon Musk-Trump duo are going to face a lot of political accountability.
One of the interesting things that happened this week was that you had a judge order DOJ employees to testify in a lawsuit against the Trump administration. What would you ask them?
Oh gosh, where to even begin? How did you get hired? What were there any background checks done? What sorts of authorizations within the government did you get to access all of this information? What is your work plan? Who's running the organization? What authorizations are you using to do any of this, if any? Are lawyers vetting any of it? If so, who? What have they said? Like, there are endless questions. But I just want to say, as we're talking about sort of the, the stop-and-go nature of litigation, this is very rare. At this stage of a litigation, to be able to put government witnesses under oath potentially and potentially put them on the stand, that sort of thing is really rare at this stage of litigation, but it will, if it moves in the right direction. If, for instance, there's an evidentiary hearing at the end of the day, that's real people, real faces, real names who are going to have to defend this stuff and take
that's
questions.
our case against the Trump administration and DOJ, where the
They're
judge...
all your cases.
Talk about your efforts. Tell folks why what you're doing, along with the community of folks in this space. Why, to Ankush's point about organizations out there doing this, not just relying on the lawyers to kind of push this through.
I mean, we want people to know that there are lawyers and there are people working day and night. I mean, some people are wondering where the pushback is. Well, you're seeing it in the courts and at Democracy Forward, but at so many organizations and our state AGs. You can learn more about this on a website called democracy2025.org, where we've outlined all of that pushback for the American people and all of that's going on. We're seeing people in communities show up. We have had people have to show up in the middle of the night to get on file in court to stop things like the funding freeze and essential services across the country. We're seeing large organizations, the National Council of Nonprofits, the American Public Health Association. I mean, these are big organizations, and we're seeing smaller community-based organizations all aligning together, getting into court, and making a real difference for people. And I think the question really is, that difference is important, but it's going to take a continued effort in the courts, as well as a continued effort by people and communities, and yes, Congress, to stop this runaway executive branch.
Congress hasn't done anything.
Thank you.
They have not done anything.
You.
The Republicans in Congress have just ceded their authority as a co-equal branch of government.
Right.
Why? What is wrong with have the Republicans called anybody?
Look, this is a remarkable aspect of what's going on right now. I hate to be high-minded about it, but we have a country with 3 branches of government, separation of powers.
We thought we did.
Checks and balances, and it is an essential part of our democracy that each of these branches engages in a little healthy competition and stands up for their institutional prerogatives. I have not seen in my lifetime Congress relinquish so much authority so quickly, sometimes explicitly acquiescing from what you hear in Republicans in Congress. And I look around and I say, well, if Trump can spend whatever he wants, if he can use tariffs to raise his revenue, why does Congress need to even exist? What is Mike Johnson even doing negotiating something if it's just paper that Trump can ignore?
Yeah, and that's the key part of it. And then even within that Trump orbit, to focus and cede control and power to one man, to sit over top of it all. I'd like to play Elon Musk defending DOJ's having access to your Social Security information. Yours.
As it is, there are tens of thousands of federal employees that have access to, already to the system. Anyone from DOJ has to go through the same vetting process that those federal employees went through. So there's not like some unvetted, random situation.
Okay, I'll say it. He's full of crap. Because everything he just said is a lie, because it is random. It is not vetted. You're not vetting the 19-year-old who's sitting atop of this system right now, making these decisions. And all those, tens of thousands of federal employees that have access already to the system. Dude, seriously? But even if they did, if that number were a real number, they were vetted. They filled out all the federal paperwork. The FBI checked their background. You just don't randomly give access to the system to just somebody because they have a federal ID. That's the problem.
There's no vetting. I mean,
thank you.
When we get into court, often the lawyers from the Department of Justice can't answer the questions about what DOJ is doing. By the way, that's why we're having to go to discovery, because they can't answer a lot of the questions about what's happening. You've seen the Social Security Administrator resign, the acting administrator resign as to what's going on. We have a case on that. You'll be hearing more from us next week on that. And so I think that this is just, it's patently false. And the question I do think is, where are the people? Where are the people putting country over party? And who decided that it was acceptable in this country and acceptable for so many people across the country to have their futures in the hands of Elon Musk, who clearly doesn't care about the American people's well-being. The stuff at NOAA, I mean, you guys were, I think, talking about that earlier, but are we going to have information about major weather disasters anymore? I mean, this is not hypothetical. It's not academic. There's an article in the New York Times saying that they planned this over a dinner party in Silicon Valley. I mean, this is not something for dinner party conversation. This is about real people's lives, and it's really high time for folks to. It's a 5-alarm fire.
I want to talk about one of the layers of oversight here, and that is Hampton Dellinger, head of the Office of Special Counsel, which, as you know, has a lot of different functions. One of their functions is to protect whistleblowers and to protect folks who want to come forward and do the right thing. Trump administration fires Dellinger. You got 2 different sets of judges that say they put a freeze on that. The freeze goes to today on that firing. So can you both bring us up to speed on the status of employment? And also, what happens if that person who's supposed to protect government employees who are whistleblowers suddenly is replaced with a Trump loyalist?
Well, right now, the courts have held, there's orders in place to keep him in the position as it should be. It's high stakes. We filed a complaint before the Office of Special Counsel. It concluded that the probationary employees had been, fired in violation of the law, and has asked for an investigation and issued an important finding there. And so there's a lot at stake for not just federal employees, but for people across the country. When you have watchdogs and positions like this Office of Special Counsel really in the balance, seeking to be politicized, there is just a lot at stake. So we're, working both before the Office of Special Counsel, before this board called the Merit Systems Protection Board, which is the other board that is where Trump has also tried to fire Kathy Harris on that board, to both protect federal employees, but really to protect the American people, because of what these employees do. This is not, again, it's not hypothetical. We want to know when there's a natural disaster coming to our communities. We want to know how we can access the Meals on Wheels, situation that you need to access in a rural community in the middle of Virginia, right? We want to know about these things, and that's what federal employees do and deliver every single day. And so it's very high stakes.
God bless you.
Harriman, Ankush Khardori, so good to see you. Thank you both so much for being with us.
Thanks.
Coming up.